the same significance for everyone, but certainly this is a well-authenticated incident. That's why I put this here. The next transparency, please. This shows us that what we have to do is to build up some sort of a diagram or model for interaction between the various phases or various sectors of intellectual activity in what we call the Islamic world. And this, I'm so glad that this Islamic Academy, Academy of the Islamic World is trying to take a look at this aspect. This session itself is a demonstration of this fact. Now, the next one is a diagram which again goes back to the Amman conference, where the muftis and ulama were also there in one session. You see, on one side we have this particular system, and on this side we have the other system. We have the things that come from religion, the things that come from observation and social sciences. Man lives in this world. He is between these two systems, and he keeps receiving signals from both the scientists and the ulama. He can't ignore either of them. What he has to do, what he needs to do, and that's where we need to help them, the common man, is to synthesize these or to bring them into some sort of reasonable agreement. In many cases, ayat of the Quran, as a book by Maurice Bucaille, the Bible, the Quran, and science has amply indicated, there is no divergence between what is in the Quran and the scientific knowledge. In fact, his claim is, Bucaille's claim is, that as scientific knowledge has advanced, and he's a medical doctor, he was, he's dead now, more and more understanding of certain obscure ayat of the Quran has become available. That's his stand. That needs to be investigated. With regard to the hadith, he is very critical. That also, I think, needs to be investigated. That's why I put up this diagram. But our problem is, sometimes we get actual opposition between the two signals. That's where the real problem arises. For example, the next slide, please. There are three possibilities. Conclusions from one side are more or less identical with those on the other side. Fair enough. But sometimes they are not. And I will indicate one where they are approximately so. If you read the tafsir of the Sabah Samawat, the seven skies, you will find they said yes, there were 5 planets known, so the earth and moon was added and something else was added and they made up 7. Then of course another planet was discovered and they said 7 is total. Then an 8th one was discovered, 9th one was discovered, so that explanation has got to be abandoned. So you need to find out what is meant by the Sabah Samawat and what is meant by, in Surah Talaq it is said, وَمِنَ الْأَرْضِ مِثْلَهُنَّ, and there are also 7 earths. I had the privilege of writing a paper on this 36 years ago, a 4th-page paper published in one of the scientific journals of Pakistan. And we were at a conference in Riyadh the year after Faisal Shaheed was murdered. And somebody asked, we need to investigate this. I said, it's already been done. I have got the 2 ahadith which exactly give the answer, and there is the answer. A 4th-page paper, and it tells you that the 7 skies are like concentric shells with a ratio of 20,000. Where I determined 20,000 is a long story, I don't want to go into that. If anyone wants the paper, I think I can give the reference. But there's a 3rd case where the two don't coincide, they diverge. That's where trouble arises. And we have that kind of problem, we've had that kind of problem twice in the Muslim Ummah. The next transparency, please. That gives you 2 examples. One is that of Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan in India, who went so far as to deny anything that was not in concordance with the then known science. And that, I think, was an extreme attitude, because the science, the knowledge of science has changed since then. And that is why some people called him naturey, a person who just believes in nature and not in the Quran. Now, we have to realize, as I said before, that these are 2 facets of what the human being needs or has, or signals that he gets. We have to try and put the two in order, harmonize them or rationalize them or make use of both of them. The next one, this is what I've said, this is an important problem in the Muslim world today. Many people refuse to take religion seriously because it's all nonsense. And of course many ulama in your countries and mine say science is all nonsense because it goes against what the Prophet ﷺ has said. Both are extreme positions. We have to somewhere bring these two groups together. And that's important for another reason, which will become clearer later on maybe, if I have the time. That is, 90% of our manpower in all countries of the Islamic world comes from that middle or lower middle strata, which is entirely devoted to belief in Allah. And therefore, somewhere in their teaching, we have to unify the concept of science with what religion tells us. How we do it is a big problem, but we need to tackle this problem if we want to use that manpower. Today what's happening is the top bit is siphoned off, educated in America or Europe or somewhere, comes back, stays a bit, doesn't like what's going on. The local people don't like them either, and then they go back, 90% of them. Hence the brain drain. We have to attend to that locally educated population. We have to attend to it, use it, develop it, and push it forward. For that, we need a multidisciplinary approach. We need to integrate it curriculum. Anyway, I'm going a bit off the track. The next, that's why it's an important problem. The next one, please. Now I want to take a detailed look at the intellectual activity and the scientific activity that I showed you. The next table will show you,
Dr. Qurashi.
the table I showed you before, now I'll show you the graph. This is a preview of the results. If you look at the next graph, which will come up in a minute, you will see that science went up, peaked around Harun Rashid, Mamun Rashid, etc., started to go down, came up again, and then the graph showed a tendency to go to zero at 400. And 400 here is about the time when a madrasas became well entrenched. So some people, like Hussein, have argued that the madrasa was the death of science. Well, it could be right or could be wrong.
Dr. Qurashi, your time is about up.
Right. I'm also near the end. The next one, please. This shows you what I'm going to talk about in the next graph, about when Al-Ghazali came just after 400. That's about 450, thereabouts. The next slide, please. Next transparency, please. And after that, you have another peak. I pointed out those two peaks, before which Rumi's advent is apparent, was apparent. And the next graph will show you. You see this, that's the first graph in the Abbasid period, the glorious Abbasid period, the second one, and this broken line going down to zero about 450. And there you have the impact of Ghazali. You see that arrow at the bottom, 450. Apparently, and Ghazali was at the bottom, near the bottom of one of those minima. He produced an impact which, instead of keeping it at zero, took it up to about 50% of the value during the time of the Abbasids. Then it dropped again, and then you have the second impulse again coming from Ibn Rushd and Rumi. That's about 600 Hijrah, and you see the next peak is even higher than the previous one. So the periods of what went on during these people's activity needs to be investigated in great detail. What was the intellectual system? What was the interaction? How did they regenerate all this? There are lots of mentioned about Ghazali. I don't need to talk about that, and Rumi. So I only want to show you just one thing. The period C, marked C, about 800 Hijrah also needs attention. Now the next transparency, if you flip this has already been said. The next one, please. This is what Ghazali has said. Those who have read the Masri of Ghazali claim, and this is an extract from a paper by the late Dr. Ghazuddin Siddiqui, who was, I think, the first Secretary General of the Islamic Academy of Sciences. In Ghazali's, in Masnavi, he pointed out that there are detailed references to three major scientific theories: gravitation, evolution, and the third one is, I think,